Michael Beller and Jake Ciely from the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast here to help you as draft season has arrived in the fantasy football world. What we're going to do is take a look at some of the most polarizing players at the top of fantasy draft boards. And right now, Jake, I want to talk about one of the most exciting wide receivers in the NFL entering his second year, CeeDee Lamb. We know he had an excellent rookie season that was hamstrung by Dak Prescott's injury, 74 grabs on 111 targets for 935 yards and 5 touchdowns. There's a lot of talk about, is he the one? Is Amari the Cooper the one? How are you looking at this Dallas Cowboys wide receiver situation, especially with respect to CeeDee Lamb and his rising fantasy draft cost?
Yeah, I don't think we need to concern ourselves with who is the one, because in this situation, similar to the Falcons last year, while Julio was healthy, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who the one is. They can both be great. This is one of those situations where we see you go to Jefferson and Thielen. A lot of teams out there back in the day of when Aaron Rodgers was throwing to Cobb and Jordy Nelson, both being ones. You can have two ones on the same team. It doesn't happen often, but it actually happens about once a year, if not more. So I have no problem with either. The only question with Cooper is the injury. So CeeDee Lamb is a terrific player. I wrote him up a couple months ago in my breakout wide receiver for 2021, and he was the first on the list. And I think everybody's on that bandwagon now because if you look at it, yes, terrific rookie season. By rookie standards, it could have been even better because through the first 5 games with Dak Prescott, if you look at it, he was wide receiver 12 through those 5 games. He never had fewer than 5 receptions and 59 yards in those games with Dak at the beginning of the season. And at the beginning of the season, everybody, CeeDee Lamb, a rookie, trying to contend with Amari Cooper as a rookie and Michael Gallup as a rookie, and he's with Dak Prescott. And we always talk about rookies, needing that time, and it's not often that we see them performing as a wide receiver one. Let's also talk about what we've been talking about this entire offseason is that there's a lot of rookies who struggled last year because of no offseason, and it was a weird year. And yet, all that being said, he was a wide receiver one through those first 5 games. So, I love CeeDee Lamb. I think you could see a situation where maybe it's like Ridley and Julio last year where Lamb ends up being the quote-unquote number one and steps slightly in front of Cooper. But again, even if it doesn't happen, I'm not that concerned. You can call them both ones because they are both ones on this team and in fantasy.
Yeah, a few things I want to say off of that. So last year, the pairing that we did have as wide receiver ones as teammates, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and maybe you see something similar happening in Dallas this season with CD being the yardage leader, but Amari still getting more looks. That would follow what we saw from DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett a season ago. And then you said, right, the floor that he had with Dak Prescott, 5 catches for 59 yards. That was his first game. That was the first game of his career and literally the first game of his career, given that there was no preseason in 2020. So the guy steps out into an NFL field for the first time, goes 5 for 59 in his very first game. And then after that, 6-106, 565, 579 and 2 touchdowns, 8 for 124. And in that 8-124 against the Giants, that's when Dak Prescott suffered his season-ending injury. So we can see why it is very easy to get excited about CeeDee Lamb going into this season. Where does your excitement take you, Jake? This is someone who we all want. This is someone who, if we're being realistic, you're going to have to be among the highest in your league on to get, because there is someone who's going to treat CeeDee Lamb as a top 10 receiver in pretty much every single fantasy draft. Certainly he's going to get treated as a wide receiver one. He's going to be one of the 10 to 12 first wide receivers off the board in your draft. We can guarantee you that. So how far is your excitement taking you, Jake? When are you jumping in here?
Well, real quick before we go to that, I want to add it a little bit more just for that one situation. Did you know he was on the field the most of all 3 wide receivers last year at 73%? And that's for the full season, not just the Dak time? No, that's full season, and 66.8 for Cooper in second place, 64.7 for Michael Gallup. Why? Because CeeDee Lamb can move and play any wide receiver position they want him to be. On top of it, he actually led the team in target percentage. On top of it, he tied with Cooper for leading the team in 1.81 yards per route run. So for all intents and purposes, he kind of checked the box as the one last year already. So, and mostly on the field that much. So everything we're saying to get to your question here is why you see the hype train rolling along, is why you see the bandwagon filling up and everybody's on it. And now, honestly, I haven't got a piece of Lamb yet because you said it. Somebody is going to be willing to take him as a top 10 wide receiver. I'm not, because I don't want to buy him at peak value where now CeeDee Lamb has to be the one again. has to outperform Cooper again. Cooper, basically, even if you take last year's numbers, I mentioned it before, is that would have put CeeDee Lamb at wide receiver 12. Okay, so 2 spots difference. You're kind of, again, if you take him at 10, it's not a huge gap, but you're asking me to make that improvement with Cooper still around, with Michael Gallup still around, and let's be honest, Dak Prescott's not going to throw for 400 yards a game like we did, because we can mention those numbers in those 5 games, and we can also understand that, yes, that points to how good Lamb can be, but also at the same time, it's not mutually exclusive to also say that Dak Prescott's not going to have that volume for an entire 17-game season. So you have somebody in your league taking Lamb as a top 10 wide receiver. I understand it. People want to be on board. People want to be the next shiny, great wide receiver like Calvin Ridley last year. But now he has to do everything we're talking about. You can't ignore the fact that Cooper and Gallup are still factors, and a healthy Zeke, who was also banged up last year, is going to involve his own touches. And now they have 2 tight ends because of what happened with the Jarwin and Schultz situation last year when they thought they were going in. The injury made the other tight end relevant, and now they could use both of them. So it's just... It's you can love Lamb, but not love the cost. And right now, the cost has gotten too high.
I love Lamb, absolutely. And
Lamb or Lamb?
Think yeah, there you go. That's the joke right there, Jakey. I think it's an important point to make about CeeDee Lamb because everyone does like him. He's an easy guy to get excited about. He's a fun guy to watch. We know that they're going to move him around. They're going to use him in inventive ways. You saw him get a little bit involved as a runner, especially toward the end of last season. And I want to say it was Week 16, championship week, when he had that long rushing touchdown that probably put some people over the top in their championship games. But it's just a super deep position at the top. And it's like, if you're going to put him inside the top 10, who are you knocking out? Are you knocking out Keenan Allen, who's going to dominate targets in L.A.? Are you knocking out Allen Robinson, who has the best quarterback he's ever had in literally his entire life, even if it is Andy Dalton, and is going to dominate targets in Chicago? Are you knocking out A.J. Brown or DK Metcalf? It becomes a very hard decision to make if you're bumping CeeDee Lamb up into the top 10. So there is a very big window in between loving Lamb but not having him as a top 10 receiver, and you can see why he can maybe get pushed down a little bit. Let's just talk about the negative for 1 second here. If things do go wrong for him, is it just there's too much other stuff involved? There's too much Cooper, there's too much Zeke, there's too much Gallup. Is that where things go sideways for CeeDee?
Well, then let me ask you the question: what's going wrong for CeeDee? Like, how? What does CeeDee Lamb have to finish for it to be good? Because
basically last year's numbers. I would say last year's numbers would be going wrong if you're taking him as anywhere between wide receiver 10 and 15.
Which is a similar situation to things we've talked about before. The floor isn't that bad. The real issue here is I can't answer this question because it doesn't go wrong. I don't care. If you want to hot take me, if you want to something, or the cold take or whatever, come back and pull this video at the end of the season because it did, and he finished with 800 yards and 4 touchdowns. It's not going to go wrong for Lamb outside of an injury. I don't want to put this on him because now people will blame me if he does get hurt. But the only way this goes wrong for Lamb is if he gets hurt, or if you're taking him as high as wide receiver 7 or 8. Then yeah, it could easily go wrong because he finishes as wide receiver 18, which isn't a bad season, but you paid that almost first round draft cost, so at least second round, mid-second round to take him there. So that's where it could go wrong, but that puts it on the managers out there. That onus is on you for taking him too high. If you're taking him as a fringe wide receiver 1, I'll just say it, Mike, it's not going to go wrong if you're taking him as a fringe wide receiver 1.
Let me posit this really quickly. Is there any risk with Dallas's defense getting better to a point where the passing game volume comes down so much that there's just not enough to support all of these pass catchers?
No, so I don't know if my video was on or it was just solely on you when you asked that question, but I made this face. No. that defense is should call it the Dallas Cowboys ifs. Throw something in, if Keanu Neal is what he was a couple of years ago, if this guy is healthy, if they can replace Van Der Esch's production, if the kid from Notre Dame, who I'm having Jalen Smith is back to being what he was 2 years. If they get a pass, no, this defense shouldn't be bottom 5. But it's not going to be a one where we talk about, that's why the Bears were in my mind, is one is like, okay, their offense doesn't get as many snaps per game because their defense can control games and also reduces the pace of the game, so the clock gets run down, all of that. The Cowboys defense will be better. It's not going to scare me away from the offense one lick. If the Cowboys defense end up top 5, I'll find a hat to eat. There's no way that's happening.
All right, wide receiver 14 for you, wide receiver 11 for me on Lamb. Last question here. What point of the draft are you thinking about drafting him?
See, and that's why I haven't taken him yet, is because it's towards the end. It's the 2-3 turn, and he's usually gone by then because, as you mentioned, somebody wants to take him. And the second round is often littered with wide receivers because a lot of people are taking running backs in the first round, so then you get that tier of receivers. I would consider him in the third round. But again, you talked about 14. Well, that means I do have the Allens, Allen Robinson, Keenan Allen in front of him. I would still take, like Terry McLaurin because I know his volume is guaranteed even with the arrival of Curtis Samuel. And so there's some wide receivers. And it just comes down to the volume game. My projections I'm looking at right now, I have 123 targets. But there's some guys right in front of him that we're talking about 130, 140 plus. So it's not, again, I don't dislike CeeDee Lamb. I was the guy talking about him 3 months ago. But now the cost is so high that to try and get him in the third round, I'm not getting him. So there you go. You're taking him before I am.